I'm Martha Higdon from quiltingbymartha.com. Today's tutorial is how to put the border on your quilt top. As you can see here on my design wall, I have a quilt that needs a border. So it's been pieced and put together, but before you even think about border, you want to make sure that your quilt top is square. And you can use a square ruler to make sure to look to see. And before you even think about it, it needs to be square, because if you're going to put strips on and it's not square, the border is not going to come on as square. So you want to make sure that all four corners are square, and that's the first thing you need to do. Then what you want to do is we're going to put the side borders on first. So to find the measurements of the side borders, we need to measure in the center of the quilt, and I love my tape measure. So we are going to measure in the middle of this quilt. We're going to go straight down the middle to get our measurements for the two side borders. It tells me I am 42.5 inches for here in the center of the quilt for my two borders. So I had already cut my two borders at 42.5 inches, and I cut them both at the same time so that I have the same width on both times, same length. And the reason why we don't want to take a measurement any other place is these two sides could be distorted, because a lot of times we're picking it up and we're moving the quilt around, so we want to take the measurement from the center. So then we want to pin the two sides on, and because this is a piece border and the piecing is on the back of this quilt, I want to make sure that my needle hits the top of it so that I'm not getting into the piecing. So the first thing I want to do is on the side of the thing, I want to find my middle. I'm going to find the middle of where I'm getting ready to put the border on, and I'm going to put a pin there. You can put a crease, you can mark it. So that's our center. I'm going to do the same thing with the border that I cut. I take it, I center it. I'm going to put a pin, or I could put a crease. I could use a marking tool. And then, since my border is a solid, it's going to be on the bottom, so I don't mess up any of my piecing. So then I'm going to take my two centers. You can see the two pins that are together, and I'm going to make sure that they are pinned in the center. Okay? And I want to make sure that it's flushed, and then I'm going to put one pin out to the side of the quilt here, because I have a lot of piecing in this one. I want to make sure that it's pinned down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the far edge, because I'm going to make sure that it quilts. The whole idea of putting the border on this way correctly is to make sure that your quilt, when finished, will lay flat. So then I'm going to pin, and I'm going to pin at each place because I have a lot of piecing. And then I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to go all the way to the end. Pin it. And then if there is a little bit, you want to make sure that it all comes in together, so you might have to fill in a little bit of gap. See, I make it nice and even so that it fits the size of your border. So once it's pinned, then we're going to move it over to the sewing machine, which I already have one on. And then we will finish sewing this one. You're going to be doing 1/4 inch all the way down. And then because I have a black border, I'm going to use a dark colored thread. This one I have a black thread. I'm simply just going to go straight down the side of my border, making sure with the piecing that I keep it straight and under. Especially if you have points, you wouldn't want to go in too far that you cut off one of your points. And you're going to do this on both sides of your quilt. Okay, and once you get both sides on your quilt on, then you go back over to your pressing table. And here, what you want to do, one, you're going to make sure it looks good. Then you're going to take your iron and then you're going to press the seam. And this is just locking your seam in place. And then you're going to gently with your fingers press it out, press it away. What you're going to be doing is pressing it towards the border. So there'll be less seams that way because there's no seams in the border. So what you want to do is press towards your border. And before you take your measurements, you want to make sure that your quilt top is completely pressed out because you got to have a correct and accurate measurement. So make sure that it's pressed and flat. If you don't have a design wall, you can use a large table, the floor, any place where you can get a good and accurate measurement. Okay, so then I got my two sides on. I'll put it back on my design wall. And then here again, we're going to make sure it's pressed out because I'm going to need another measurement, and I need an accurate measurement so that this quilt will lay flat with the borders on. Okay? So then I need a top and bottom border. So this time I need my measurement through the center of the quilt, and it includes the two side borders. So what you want to do is then, in the center of the quilt, and it is measure twice, cut once, just about 44, not a little bit shy of 44, right in the center. Make sure that I'm in the center of the quilt. And then it's about right at 44. Okay, so then I'm going to go over to my cutting table. And when you're cutting your strips, you need to make sure that your strips are straight as well. And then I'm going to measure off 44. And luckily, this was just enough for that. And then I cut both pieces at the same time so that I have both measurements at the same time. Then I come back over, going to double check. And we're right at 44. So then I would do the same thing. I would take it back off my wall, come back over here. Because there's piecing on this side, we want it to be the side we piece. And this is solid. Again, we're going to find the center. Put a little crease. And we're going to find the center of the quilt top. Put a little crease, find the two, and when you find the center, make sure you have your pins, and then you're going to pin both centers together. Same as thing before, you're going to pin a little bit, and then you're going to find the end. And then you pin your end to make sure the ends meet, and then you're going to go in and put your pins in the middle. Because there's so many piecing, I would normally put a lot of pins here on each pin, on each piece. And then you go back over to your sewing machine, and then you sew it down, again pressing out when you're finished, pressing away. And that is how you add a border to your quilt to keep it straight. Now let's say it's more than the 45 or the 44 inches that we have in a regular strip of piecing, and we have a larger border that we need to do. So then what you want to do is do a diagonal. So in this case here, we have two pieces of fabric, and we want to make them one. We're going to do right sides together, and we want to make sure that this goes one way, so we're going to do a diagonal seam. So what I like to do is find the diagonal, and then normally I like to put a little crease, or I can use my chalk. I can pin it. Make that line, go over to the sewing machine, you're going to sew down that line, and then after you sew it, you're going to come back over, and then you're going to check it first, make sure that it does go flat, straight up, and then you'll press, and then you have one, and then you'll go back and you're cutting. You want to cut that piece off after to make sure that it is going to lay flat, so that you have one continuous border for your quilt top. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to properly put on borders on your quilt. Look for more tutorials from quiltingbymartha.com.